Welcome to Live Well, Dream Big. I'm Suzanne Monroe, founder of the International Association of Wellness Professionals, where I've been teaching people how to live a life of wellness, tap into their passion, and go for their dreams for over 15 years. I believe living well and dreaming big starts with ourselves. This podcast will show you how to create a healthy, holistic life, empower your mindset, follow your dreams, and make a big impact. Let's dive in right now. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Live Well, Dream Big. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode. In today's episode, I'm talking with Reverend Karen Russo. She's a money coach as well as an interfaith minister, and she believes that money and spirituality are closely linked. You know, I met Karen many years ago, and I was compelled by her message because usually money and spirituality are not two things that happen in the same conversation. They're things we don't mix together. But Karen believes they're intimately connected, and in this episode, she talks about just that. She also shares what she calls the 3 money traps that most people fall into and how to avoid them. It's a juicy conversation. So thanks for tuning in. Let's get started. Welcome to today's episode, Money Loves Rhythm. Today, we're talking about how to escape your money traps and sustain spiritual and financial wellness. And I'm very excited today to have with me a special guest, Reverend Karen Russo, who is a money coach, an award-winning author of The Money Keys, as well as the creator of the 21-day Spiritual Money Jumpstart for entrepreneurs, coaches, creative folks, and spiritual seekers, which you can find at her website, themoneykeys.com. Karen also has a special passion for working with women. She's contributed a chapter called Sex, Energy, and Money, sounds very juicy, to Think and Grow Rich for women. Her clients and students also achieve 3 predictable results: cash flow breakthrough, healing old money shame, and major business momentum. And Karen shares from over 25 years of success with an unusual blend of an experience. She has an MBA from Columbia University. She was a top-selling salesperson. She's an accomplished corporate trainer and an ordained interfaith minister. Welcome, Karen.
Oh, thank you so much, Suzanne. Thank you so much for having me, and just congratulations on the evolution of the IAWP.
Well, thank you. You know, not everyone knows out there, but I'm just so excited you're here, Karen, because you and I connected, we were saying probably over a decade ago or more, when I was actually just getting started. I was doing one of my first interview series out there. And I remember at the time coming across your work and being very intrigued, especially at the time, because there was really very few people talking about this idea of money being spiritual. And I remember at the time thinking, okay, is that so? How does that work exactly? And so maybe that's a good place to start us out, Karen, is just telling us a little bit about your journey and story and how you came to put like spirituality and money together. I'd love to hear just a little bit about your journey.
Yes. Well, thanks so much. And really, how did those two things, which seem so separate, come together? It's a reflection of my whole life. And what's interesting is the dynamics that were in place 15 years ago. So much has changed in our world and what it means to be a coach and an entrepreneur and someone who's a conscious business owner. So much has changed, and yet so many of the ideas are classics. So we'll have a little bit of both. But, you know, I was teasing earlier, I'm in my suburban childhood home. I came up on the East Coast of North America with something really positive in my family background, which is my parents had a very functional relationship when it came to money. And although we had many other challenges, which could be a whole different podcast, but the money teamwork was really positive. And I grew up with this idea that if you worked hard, and my job was school, that's what we were told, you go to school, that's your job, that life could be fair and ethical, and you could have money, and that the government would provide libraries. And it was positive and functional. And I'm not going to diminish positive and functional. That was kind of my beginning of money work ethics. And then at the same time, as a teenager, and particularly as a young adult, I had some tremendous challenges, and including my own drinking. And I had to find a power greater than myself. And many of your community will understand what I'm talking about. And that recovery journey helped me find my spirituality. So as I became an adult, I was working at a bank and I was in the money world and I was functioning and I was earning money and I believed money was fair. And then I had this spiritual rising that was coming up, and I was keeping them separate because I thought to be successful in business, you had to not be vulnerable or show your emotions and certainly not your spirituality. And in what I found in the recovery and the spiritual world was that it really was a little bit not necessarily the common thing to have a functioning money life. It was a little bit like looked down upon almost. So as you're kind of hearing, Suzanne, it was like things were apart. And then about 15 years ago, it became really clear. It's like, how do I bring things together? Right? It's like things have to come together. And so that's where I started looking around and I noticed in the spiritual communities, there wasn't a lot of financial acumen and skill. And then in the wealth building communities, people were all like breaking boards and saying, you've got a millionaire mind, but there wasn't a lot of consciousness or surrender to something greater. And so, in 2005, 6, 7, I said, how do they go together? And that's how The Money Keys was born.
Wow. That's really interesting. I guess what comes to mind when you say that, though, is like when you started on this journey, because here you were kind of growing these two areas separately. Did you think, and you said, how do they come together? Did you wonder like maybe they don't fit together? Or did you have this feeling like, no, they definitely will fit together?
I always felt it was, and because my spirituality comes from a holistic point of view where it's all of the same divine origin, I'd been taught and I had a belief that everything everything is connected. And so it wasn't easy, but I believed it was possible from the start. I mean, isn't that interesting? It's like just even the question is like, do money and spirituality belong together? Do money and food belong together? Does money and muscles belong together? Does spirituality and health belong together? Can you be spiritual if your body isn't thriving?
You're speaking our language here as a holistic community and this whole idea that everything is interconnected, right? But yet the funny thing is about that, I think even though there's a belief of that's the work that we teach, that's the work that we coach, money still seems to be the one, even though we see it in our Wellness 360 wheel, it's still the one that's like, wait, I get that, but how does it work, right? And I know you're going to be helping us to understand that a little bit more today.
Yes. And, so that's really where the compassion and that's where the conversation comes from, is that money is an area where it can really be a sticking point for people. And why is that the case? I think everyone's on their own journey individually, collectively. But I think, Suzanne, is that for many, just if you think of the evolution of work, money, business, and commerce, for women, for people of color, for many, the empowerment and the access to work, money, capital, freedoms is a newer thing in the last couple of 100 years, right? So it's like some of it's evolutionary. And then it could also be that that we all just have a place where we have our edge of practice. And so it may just be this is a place where your community, especially because everyone's committed to having a holistic thing of success, that this is just going to be a place where people are going to grow on their edge.
I love that idea, grow on your edge. And it's interesting that you talk about this kind of being this evolution, because I think, just by nature, we tend to have a lot of baggage when it comes to money. I mean, it makes sort of sense, right? Maybe we're taught on some level, money is the root of all evil, or we see in the movies how, rich people are the bad guys and the spiritual gurus are the ones like shedding all their belongings. So I think sometimes it's hard to reconcile these perspectives, even if in our mind, we're like, oh yeah, money's spiritual, but we've been ingrained with all these kind of different beliefs. I mean, how do you feel like that impacts our thinking around money? Is that part
Absolutely.
of it? Or
There's stereotypes in our culture. The rich are greedy and should maybe be resented. The poor are needy and maybe should be pitied. Neither does not empower either group and is not completely accurate, right? And then there's definitely a religious tradition that it's interesting what Paul said in that scripture is the love of money, when it interferes with our connection with the divine, is the root of all evil. So it's not even the money. The money is the substance, but when we put anything in between ourselves and the divine, that's when it becomes the root of separation. I mean, but you definitely, there are ideas that we don't have enough models of, Arlen, the African-American venture capitalist out of San Francisco, who's done amazing things with her work. We don't have enough, particularly women who are vital, empowered business leaders leading a community, making great money. And that's why, in many ways, Suzanne, what you're creating for women and for men, for coaches who care about wellness, creating this idea that you can thrive and to do it in community can really help shift some of that mentality.
Well, thank you. And I know you being out there in the world as well. It's like, and I hear you talk about this evolution. It's almost like we're rewriting the story right now, kind of as we talk about it, right? Things are shifting. We've seen a lot of changes and there's still more to come.
Yes.
Well, let's get into it, Karen, because you say there are certain money traps that we can get caught in. I was very excited to I'm like, oh, I can't wait to hear what these are. It sounds very intriguing because I guess if we know our traps, then I don't know, maybe we can avoid them. So what are these money traps exactly? And how can we make sure we don't fall into these traps?
Well, so I'll talk about 3 money traps. And for each one, listen for the clues of like, am I caught here? And then for each one, I'll also give like, how do you escape? What's the antidote?
Okay.
And a good analogy, it's not perfect, but if you think about physical health and vitality, you need strength, endurance, and flexibility if you're going to be holistic. But there's going to be different seasons of your life where you're going to focus on one maybe more than the other, or one will be compromised. And that's how I want you to think about the money traps. This is not a checklist of bad things. This is clues for where your next step is. So the first trap is scarcity. And this scarcity is an anxiety-ridden idea of lack. And you'll know you're in scarcity if you have fear or worry or concern. It could be terror. It could be a subtle upset, but it's almost always future-focused. Almost always future-focused. Right now, for the people who are tuning into this conversation, for most of us, we have tonight a safe place to sleep inside, and internet and clean water. Hopefully, things are challenging for people right now. And there are billions of our brothers and sisters who don't have that. And I'm not making light of anybody's circumstance, but you can kind of see like sometimes fear about money, the scarcity feels like it's life or death, when really it's only life or death if we're projecting into the future that we're not going to have something. So Suzanne, so that's like that scarcity trap. Do you recognize that in either yourself, your clients, the community?
Well, absolutely. I think what I'm really hearing from you, it's almost like whenever we're getting out of the present, there's going to be fear because it's about the unknown, whether it's about money or anything else. And for sure, yes, I feel like that's been part of my journey as well, and having to realize, okay, come back to where you are right now, because then what happens is I find myself, I'll be operating from that fear and making decisions that are not even really based on reality.
Exactly.
So, and I see this a lot for coaches in our community as well, getting just way too far downstream in terms of the future, as you're talking about. So resonating.
And I worked with a gal who, a coach and expert. She wanted to do a big in-person event. This was a couple of years ago. And she overspent and wanted to kind of look good, and ended up with a lot of bills and a lot of debt, business debt. And then she was afraid she wouldn't get out of it. And she was afraid about incurring more. And so it was like a spiral down. The fear can just spiral us down. So she wasn't making good, sensible decisions about projects she was going after, how to price things. And for her, the key for all of us is to start to focus on, this is the spirituality, because there's really three areas. And the antidote in scarcity is to develop a spiritual or holistic or inspired connection with the source behind the channels of the money. And so for my client, is she started to really get, just as you said, her spiritual practice up-leveled. She got calm about the debt that she did have, and she started to make more inspired decisions about generating revenue. Ironically, she raised her prices. She went after bigger projects. So she was able to generate the revenue to pay back the debt and to build her business. If she had stayed in the fear, she would have been too contracted. So the spirituality is it's really about cultivating a relationship with whatever you believe is the source that money and clients and good things come from. It's really important to not think our security comes from a channel like a great database or a generous lover or a good portfolio of investments, because channels come and go. And the source behind the channels is what really brings us our spiritual connection.
That's huge right there. I just got to say that again. The source behind the channels is what really is the connection. And as you say that, I think to myself, maybe that's just an awakening that people need to have, because when you're going about life and you're having these fears, let's say you're caught up in money, or you have the anxiety about the future, and maybe your belief is that you've never really even thought that there was a source behind money. Maybe money was just, again, out there. And so here we are. I guess you're connecting these two worlds, but we have to fundamentally believe that too.
Yes, exactly. So for some, it may just be awakening or investigating the idea that there's a spiritual source behind material channels, and that money, I often will say, money is neutral. We make the meaning about money, and we're powerful as meaning makers. So I really think of money as just a symbol of supply. And for me, I would use a phrase like a symbol of divine supply. It's how source, infinite loving source, reveals itself to and through me. All right, so that's your first trap, scarcity. And the key is this spirituality.
Okay.
And then the second is it's superstition. And the superstition, because you said this, Suzanne, you said if we're out of the present moment, we're off. See, superstition is when you're stuck in the past about money. So superstition is resentment, anger, guilt, shame about my own or others' past money mistakes or choices or actions. And so you'll notice someone's in superstition if they say, well, money's hard for people like me. Let me tell you this history. Or someone might say, it's really hard because of my past experience for me to be able to price fully, to sell confidently, to be able to save. I can't do this because family, community, patriarchy, something is against me or a block. And what's awful about superstition is it totally drains creativity. It just stifles us. So again, if you're in a lot of superstition and regretting the past, it's hard to really be creative in the present moment. So I don't know if that's showing up with your folks. It might be subtle.
Well, I just love that you called it superstition, because I was like, where is she going with this? But then as you described it, and I heard you say, okay, it's about these, things that maybe have happened to you for real in life in the past, but you're kind of still carrying them forward. And someone might be saying, well, these things did happen, Karen. That's a reality. That is my story. But when you add the word superstition to it, it's like, okay, well, you're applying something to those stories to bring them now here into the present, versus they happen, but they could also just stay there. I mean, I just think this whole idea of superstition is kind of interesting, because it's almost like you're carrying them forward in a way.
In a way that is not necessary. Mm-hmm. So I checked out one of the podcasts of one of your community members who told her money story and how it was an overcoming story. And for most of your coaches, I mean, that's what will often light people up to want to be a coach. They had a health challenge, overcame it, and what they're able to empower people with is it's possible, no matter what your past is, to have a different present moment, and out of that create something different in the future. So that's really the antidote to superstition, is a positive, empowering use of the laws of cause and effect, or the law of attraction, or the co-creation is how I think of it, where our consciousness, what we choose, our thoughts, our emotion, our conversation, our intensity about it, when we focus that in a way that is the experiences we want to have with money, fairness, contribution, joy, collaboration, freedom, when we do that, that's what we experience. And that's what you'll see when people really understand that they don't have to reproduce the past. What happens is they start to get creative and generous and collaborative, and they'll start to price fairly. They'll do joint ventures that make sense. They'll look for opportunities to really make a difference, and to do so at good financial flow. So freedom is possible. That's the second one. And then the third, this is what's really interesting. So I've talked about spirituality, and the second area is beliefs. And the third area, the trap, is survival mode. And that is financial overwhelm. It's like quicksand. Like, the more I'm busy, I can't stay up. I've always got unreconciled accounts. I'm behind with the bookkeeper. The taxes are out of date. I'm always kind of scrambling. I don't really know my numbers. It's hard for me to keep up my commitments in my marketing, my selling, my accounting. And when that's happening, it's a big drain of energy, a big waste of time. And it kind of cuts us off from being in what I would call the flow. So survival mode is about developing habits. It's about developing habits that are based on the law of circulation. And this is why it's the title of this is Money Loves Rhythm. So most people think in the area of habits that the point is to just be busy all the time, or to that the only good thing that you want with money is to have more of it. And what I've discovered is when you have healthy financial habits, it's more like vitality. Like, a body that's healthy knows how to rest and be active. A relationship that's healthy has give or take. So the principle here is the law of circulation. And it's about being in a healthy level of, we build our wealth through activity, but we have to experience our wealth with awareness. And both are really important.
Wow. You just said so much there. I'm like, ooh, taking it all in. I think what's coming to mind, I think about my own journey a little bit. I think about many of the coaches in our community, many of our listeners as well. It's that I picture back when I was just getting started. Maybe I worked through healing some of those initial traps, and I created a certain level of success. But maybe I picture myself that I still hadn't really gotten kind of to this third level. So even though I'd created a certain amount of success, I wasn't paying attention to my numbers. I wasn't looking at my metrics. I wasn't doing all the things that you're talking about. So I think I was blocked at some level. It wasn't really until I went to that third level that I was able to keep growing. So, I mean, have you seen that as well? Can you kind of solve one of these money traps, but not the other? And then you get so far, but you don't get far enough? Or what happens if you only get one of the money traps and not all three at the same time?
Oh, that's a great question. And I think your awareness about, it's an evolution upward, and that's just like the wellness journey. When I was coming up, it's like all we wanted to be was thin, and that ship has sailed. What I want to be now is strong. I got 70 pounds and a push press over my head. Like, so there's an evolution always of like, what is it that's important? And so I would say it's important to always have for if you had financial fitness and wholeness, you'll want to have health and strength in your spirituality, in your beliefs, and in your habits. And money is seasonal. There may be a season. If you're Suzanne Monroe and you're going to the third level, you may have a season where you're going to focus on your habits, looking at metrics, having a weekly rhythm. And I'll say more about that in a moment. You may be doing more with your habits at one point in your life. And then may be another point where, for many people, these last couple of years have been about a spiritual understanding of being sourced by something greater, where maybe I was a person who did a lot of hands-on work, and now I had to go virtual, and I had to discover that I was supplied in a way I didn't know I could be. So there's a seasonality to which area you might be focused on. All are important, but this is part of the individual journey.
Well, and I love that. I think I love this idea of seasons, right? There are these seasons that we pass through in all areas of our life. And just hearing that there's these seasons on your money journey, I think could be very healing for people, because what comes to mind is you might be in one season now, but that season's going to change.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And sometimes there's sort of a limiting-ish conversation about money where I don't know whose life is like this, but there was a time, kind of a Western culture thing where, we were all supposed to get some kind of job and have it for decades, and then have incremental income that went up like this, and you save a little bit. And then you'd read in these books and you'd see these charts, like if you didn't start saving at 27, you were just, going to be a bag lady if you were 42 or something. Just stuff that isn't even like, it's not even helpful, because that's not what people's lives are like. Our lives are recreation, a new gig, something amazing, all of a sudden a tenfold increase. Or I'm working with a lot of people now, people who are doing our self-study programs and who are working on these ideas, who are saying, you know what? I want 3 high-end clients a month. I don't need to have my business look like this other person's. So the seasonality and the authenticity of an individual's journey is really important.
That individual piece, to me, as I hear you talk about that, it's like this energy that really comes into what you're creating versus, hey, thinking that these rules are all the same for everyone, looking at what everyone else is doing. Because if you're doing that, then you're not having that real connection that you talked about a little bit earlier on. The individual piece is so important. I know you're going to talk a little bit more about how to put this all into practice. Let me ask you this, though, because what I did want to ask you was, is it harder for some people to kind of overcome these traps or create a positive relationship with money? I mean, are there some people that are more likely to fall into the traps? Or are we all is everybody dealing with these same 3 money traps, and we're all just on our own journeys and they all apply? Or what are your thoughts on that?
I think similar to strength, flexibility, and endurance. So everyone has some relationship to some of those things in some way, but you may have a body where your version of strength might be tiny weights because of how your body is abled. So the way I feel about it is, for someone to really have a holistic, vital experience of wealth, money, work, and contribution, they could be a person who had only so many digits in their income and family and work and business life, but could still have a sense of generosity and contribution. And so I think it's a little bit like everybody's on their own journey, but these are the elements of a holistic experience.
Okay, that makes sense. And I know our episode is called Money Loves Rhythm. You just kind of touched on that, but just remind us again, what exactly does that mean? Money loves rhythm. Like, is it this flow, or what is that? How do you define that?
Yes. So, and this is where I'll teach a little bit about the ironic thing that is that we learn through challenge and support. We build ourselves through rest and activity. It's important to have both the yin yang type energy in anything that we're doing. And money, and this was where I remember you talked about in the introduction, the sex energy chapter in Think and Grow Rich for Women is about the power for people of whatever gender expression or orientation. We all have access to masculine and feminine energies around money, and both are valuable. And the rhythm is action and awareness. And money and the experience of a wealthy, satisfying life is built through action, and it must be experienced through awareness. So the practices that I like to teach are Money Monday, which is where the masculine energies of focus, direction, action, wisdom come into play, Money Monday. And then Faithful Friday, which is the feminine spiritual faith qualities of receptivity and inclusivity and love and gratitude. So on Money Monday, this is my recommendation if you want to have more rhythm with your money. And when you're in rhythm, when you're in flow, as Suzanne said, you're less exhausted, you're more effective, and you can sustain it over time. On Mondays, give. You want to give your attention to your money. So look at all of your accounts. I recommend that people are tithers or spiritual givers. And the word tithe, T-I-T-H-E, means a tenth. And across the religious and spiritual traditions of thousands of years, people have given thanks for 100% of the crops or the money, and then you leave or give 10% behind. I have a business, which is a for-profit business with the heart of a ministry. And for all the revenue that comes into the money keys, off of the top, we give 10%. Now, you give whatever. I think the important thing is to be a giver. So give 1/10 of 1%. But look at it every week on Mondays. Mondays, you give attention to your money, you give attention, you give financially, and you give attention to your week. And you say, what are the most leveraged financial actions I can take? So Suzanne, I'll pause there. If you imagine everybody doing that on Monday, what do you think they get?
I'm getting excited. I'm just getting excited. Like, yay. And I really love what you said about this balance within this element of money, because I heard you say, rest and activity, this masculine, feminine, yin and yang. And it's like, oh my gosh, it's sort of like an awakening, right? Because it's just making such perfect sense, because we need it in all areas of our life. But here you are applying it to money. And it's this, you've got to be doing kind of both to create that rhythm, to create that balance. And just hearing it is really so healing. And I think it is for everyone listening too, I'm getting, because on one hand, you might be the person who's sitting back saying, I'm just going to say my affirmations. I'm going to be more in the feminine and hope it all works out. On the other hand, you might be the person who's pushing. That would have been me, right? And I'm making this happen. And that just this balance is like, wow, they both matter. But when you do one or the other, you kind of hinted to this, it's not sustainable.
Exactly. If you're overusing masculine energy, there'll be a point at where it just feels frantic. If you're overusing feminine energy without the focus and the decisiveness, there'll be an emptiness that emerges. So both are really important. And what I've seen, a colleague of mine, a very high-end, brilliant coach, spiritual transformation teacher, she has 4 times her profitability from just implementing the Money Monday, because she was always brilliant and she was always kind of generating things. But because she's looking at her numbers and really seeing and evaluating, and all of a sudden, my friend who used to be a very much a queen of the sliding scale is no longer the queen of the sliding scale. Do you know what I'm saying? It's because she's looking at her numbers every Monday. So anyway, just her profitability is just skyrocketed. So Money Monday is about focus and clarity, and it's essential. And Faithful Friday, you have to rest. So if you're a Suzanne and you're kind of more in the go, do, there's a real value in taking the rest on Friday. So Faithful Friday. And if you do this Saturday morning, that's great, or Thursday evening, but Faithful Friday is at the end of your working week. You stop. And there's 2 reflections. The first is looking back over the week and celebrating that your money results are happening now. So there's something about looking back and saying, I was committed to 5 prospecting outreaches every week. That was a big stretch. I did 4 this week, and I want to recognize that. I did 4. If I hadn't thought about it, I would have done just 2. It's like, look at your money results. And then the second reflection is you deliberately develop some gratitude for the source behind the channels. So just what we talked about earlier, if you want to deepen spiritually, it's really nice to have a time set aside for that deeper spiritual reflection. And when you can feel and experience and be aware that there's a divinity, there's a universal something, there's a good that is for me, that wants me to be supplied, that experience is essential, because we cannot get something that we cannot have the capacity to experience. So think about if any of you are relationship coaches, if someone is like, I want a lover who has these qualities and all of this, the good coach will ask, when you have that, what will that do for you? And the person will say something like, well, then I'll really have the sense of confidence and belonging and well-being. And it's like, if you can't experience confidence and belonging and well-being with yourself, no one can give it to you. If you cannot experience being satisfied, being supplied, being appreciative for the money and material and work and clients that you do have, it's hard really to get and keep more.
Wow. It's powerful hearing about these two practices and how really they fit together in such a big way. As I'm thinking about this, I'm wondering, are these practices you start doing, life shifts, you're all good? Are these practices you're doing forever? Because Karen, what happened to you when you kind of figured out these traps and overcame them? Are you like still doing these practices? Is this a lifelong thing you're going to be doing on Monday and Friday?
Here's the thing. Yeah. It's like, so I do a version of Money Monday and Faithful Friday. I've been doing it for years. And I'm glad you asked what happened for me. I started to really get clear on what my goals are in my business, and they've evolved. So to this day, I still, on Mondays, I look at my business bank account, I organize it by deposits, I look at my tithing, I look at the cash flow for the week, I look at, are there bills coming up, things that I need to be responsible for? Are there any things I need to get to the accountant? I do all my financial tidying and organizing, and then I look to the week and I say, what are the opportunities for extending the Money Keys work out into the world? And that gets me focused for the week. And I still do a pause on Friday, and I'm very grateful for what has happened. I also give myself the opportunity to stop and rest, which I think is really important. And these are ongoing practices, like, you don't just do a down dog once. Like, right? You just keep it's ongoing.
If you want to keep the money rhythm going.
Exactly.
I love it. And the celebration piece, I just want to pull that out. I think that's so huge. I know that was something for me that I didn't always do. And maybe I'd reach my goals, I'd keep moving forward, but then I'd be on to the next thing. And I think that celebration piece of yourself, honoring yourself, acknowledging yourself, what you're talking about, taking that rest time, again, this balance, it's so huge because otherwise it isn't sustainable. I do have a question for you. How long does it take to actually say people are listening today? They're like, okay, you're speaking my language, Karen, the traps, I get it. I'm going to start doing the practices. How long does it take to change, quote unquote? I mean, is everybody's journey different? Is this automatic once you get it, or does it take years to unravel? Like, what are we looking at for a timeline here?
Oh, that's so good. That's such a good, we all want fast results for sure. And I would say it's absolutely possible to have an instantaneous insight and transform. And yet, for most people, development takes place over time. And so something like a 21-day immersion into these ideas is often what it will take for people to jumpstart their experience of a spirituality that's inspired, beliefs that are empowering, and habits that get you in the flow. All right. So this could be the time when we go into chat and questions. Heather, will you say more, please, on masculine energy? So yes, I absolutely will. Masculine money focus is valuable. Feminine spiritual faith is valuable. Both of those energies are important with money. And masculine qualities or approaches to wealth include action, decision, single focus, clarity. And with those qualities, what happens is there's this sense of cause and effect that's positive. And with masculine energy, particularly for most individuals who are here who are coaches, when your masculine energy is healthy around money, you'll make decisions and not regret it. You'll be able to ask for what you're worth and not feel embarrassed. It can be very positive. I'm going to make the case for the feminine qualities of wealth as well. The feminine qualities are inclusiveness, which is the capacity to realize that everything in your work and business, the wisdom that you get from Suzanne, the support of the community, your family and friends, your life experience that informs your work, you're able to include and appreciate all of it. That's what feminine's quality about wealth. It's inclusivity. It's the ability to have. It's the ability to feel grateful. So when that is active and healthy, you'll find that there are people who are able to have some joy around making money, who are able to give and receive very graciously and generously, and who just bring like a sense of life and contribution into their work.
And I just love hearing you describe kind of the different traits and characteristics that kind of fall into these. Because sometimes I think we hear masculine or feminine and we're thinking, okay, we're not totally taking in what that actually means energy wise, but to hear the different traits associated with it as it relates to money, that's like, okay. And it feels very healing. It's like, okay, I can see now how both of these kind of play out. Vesela is saying in the chat here, could you please expand on the suggested activities for Faithful Friday?
Yes. So Money Monday is 10 to 20 minutes. You're usually at your computer. Faithful Friday can be 5 to 10 minutes. It's not a long time. I often will have a song that I'll put on that reminds me that it's Faithful Friday. And there's 2 reflection questions. How can I celebrate my money results? And how can I appreciate the source behind the channels? So the first question is almost like an external review of your week. What's happened and how can I see that my results and celebrate them? And then the second reflection is, let me tune in to being really appreciative of the spiritual source behind the material channels. So it's a conscious internal reflection of being thankful to the good of the divine or source or life, and feeling that inner spark. So when you do those 2 things, usually at the end of Faithful Friday, people feel more satisfied, more complete. Is it possible to do this monthly? And the answer is sure. You can tune into all of your money work monthly. I find for most people, it's when things are done monthly, there's a little bit of like, I forgot, I have to ramp up. I had someone say to me once, doing things monthly is a little bit like getting into a cold bathtub. It's a little like, and weekly just has you a little bit more engaged. So, and I think the wellness analogies are good ones. It's like, think about the things that you recommend to your clients usually have a frequency that's more like weekly or even more frequent than that if you're really developing consciousness and skills. So here's a great question. How to deal with your own worth with respect to charging clients when you're just starting out. How does a person connect with what you're offering and what the client receives? Such a good question. So I've always felt that pricing or charging it's both a spiritual as well as a mental and a confidence question. And so the number one thing in pricing is to focus on the value and the results that the client is getting more than trying to prove my credibility and resume and experience. So when it comes to pricing, you always want to think what's happening for the client that's a problem that I am helping them solve. And then when they solve that problem, what's it worth to them? So you just start to get in your mind more of a service and a results orientation. And that will help you take a little bit of the personal only worth on your charging. And then I just think in general, it's not many people who say, I found a really cheap wellness coach. I can't believe how cheap this person is. I can't wait to go to my cheap coach. That's not usually what people are looking for in a coach. They're looking for someone who can really help them and make a difference. So all of that to say, price yourself, be smart, price yourself within the middle to the high range, just, and then start to justify your higher range there based on the value you create, even if you're starting out.
Karen, I want to be respectful of your time. I want to thank you for being here. I think your message is just so impactful for so many people, all of our listeners out there. And I just appreciate you being here with all of us.
Well, thank you so much.
And thanks to everyone joining us. I look forward to our next conversation together soon. Take care, everybody. Thank you for joining me for today's episode of Live Well, Dream Big. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation. And I want to invite you to take your next step toward living well and dreaming big by downloading the Live Well, Dream Big lifestyle book. It's the ultimate guide to becoming your best self and living life on your own terms. You can grab your complimentary copy by going to the link in the show notes or heading directly to iawpwellnesscoach.com/guide. That's iawpwellnesscoach.com/guide.